The ancient world holds stories and mythologies that are as fascinating as they are timeless. Tonight, we will wander into one of the greatest epics ever told, a story of princes and kings, of love and exile, of battles that shaped the memory of an entire civilization. Before you settle in, take a moment to make yourself comfortable. And if you enjoy these late-night history wanderings, consider subscribing. And if you'd like, leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. It's always fascinating to see who's tuning in from different corners of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe put on a small fan, just for that steady hum in the background. Now, let's begin. What if I told you that the story of Rama is not just a tale of the past, but a living puzzle carried across centuries, told and retold in countless voices, each time revealing something new? In the heart of the ancient world, where rivers curved like silver threads and forests stretched deep and untamed, there stood a city unlike any other, Ayodhya. Its name meant the unconquerable, and it seemed to live up to that promise. The city lay on the banks of the sacred Sarayu River, its waters glistening under the sun, carrying with them the whispers of generations. Wide streets ran straight and clean, lined with tall houses built of stone and wood. Palaces shone with golden spires, and gardens overflowed with flowering trees whose scent drifted into the air. Merchants filled the markets with silks and spices, precious metals and crafted goods. Priests recited ancient hymns at dawn, their voices echoing softly as smoke from ritual fires curled upward. Farmers brought their harvests from the fertile land surrounding the city. And in the training grounds, warriors practiced with bows, swords, and chariots, their discipline admired across kingdoms. Ayodhya was more than a city. It was a symbol of harmony and prosperity, a place where law and faith held steady, and where the people felt protected under the rule of their king, Dasharatha. Dasharatha belonged to the solar dynasty, a line of kings who traced their heritage back to the sun itself. He was a seasoned warrior, one whose arrows had flown across countless battlefields, bringing peace to lands beyond his own. Yet he was not a ruler consumed by conquest. He loved his city, his people, and above all, his duty. His court was filled with ministers known for wisdom and loyalty. Sages came often, drawn by the generosity of his patronage. Still, for all his power and wealth, the king bore a silent sorrow, one that followed him like a shadow. Dasharatha had 3 queens: Kausalya, his chief consort; Kaikeyi, the daughter of a mighty king; and Sumitra, gentle and thoughtful. Each queen was devoted to him, and each longed for the joy of children. Yet years passed, and no heir was born to carry forward the throne of Ayodhya. The absence weighed heavily on the king's heart, for in that age a ruler without a successor risked not only his dynasty but also the stability of his realm. Whispers spread through the city. Priests spoke of imbalance, and in quiet moments the queens themselves prayed to the gods for the blessing of motherhood. At last, Dasharatha sought counsel from his sages. Among them was the revered Rishi Vashista, who advised him to perform a great sacrifice, the Ashwamedha, the horse sacrifice, an ancient and solemn rite meant to secure divine favor. The king prepared with care, sparing no effort in its observance. When the rituals were completed, another sage, Rishyashringa, was invited to conduct a sacred ceremony known as the Putra Kameshti Yajna, a rite performed by those who longed for children. The fires were lit, the hymns were chanted, and offerings were poured into the flames. As the smoke rose high, it seemed to carry the prayers of the king and his queens into the heavens. From that sacred fire emerged a shining figure, carrying a golden vessel filled with a divine nectar. It was said to be the blessing of the gods themselves. The figure presented it to Dasharatha and instructed him to share it among his queens. With reverence, the king offered the nectar. Kausalya received a portion, as did Kaikeyi, and the remaining was given to Sumitra, who was destined to bear twins. In time, the palace that had long echoed with silence was filled with new sounds, the laughter and cries of infants. Kausalya gave birth to Rama, whose very presence seemed to radiate serenity. Kaikeyi bore Bharata, whose strength and sense of duty would grow to match his half-brothers. Sumitra, from her double share, gave birth to twin sons, Lakshmana and Shatrughna. The people of Ayodhya rejoiced, their sorrow forgotten, their voices raised in celebration. The city decorated its streets, lamps burned through the night, and the air was alive with the music of drums and flutes. Rama, the firstborn, soon became the jewel of Ayodhya. Even in his earliest years he seemed touched by something greater, as though the gods had chosen him for a purpose far beyond the palace walls. His face carried calmness, and his eyes reflected kindness. When he smiled, it was said the hearts of all who saw him grew lighter. His bond with Sita, though still far in the future, seemed written already in the stars. Lakshmana, his inseparable brother, clung to him even in childhood, shadowing him in play, in study, in every step. Bharata, gentle yet firm, admired Rama deeply, seeing in him not only a brother, but an ideal. Shatrughna, closest to Bharata, completed the circle, devoted and loyal. Together the four brothers formed a bond so strong that nothing seemed capable of dividing them. As they grew, their education was entrusted to sages and teachers who instructed them in the arts of warfare, scripture, and governance. Rama excelled in all. His skill with the bow was unmatched, his understanding of law profound, but it was his humility that left the deepest impression. He treated elders with respect, his companions with warmth, and even servants with kindness. He was firm when necessary, yet never cruel. The people of Ayodhya watched him with quiet admiration. They saw in him the promise of a future king who would not merely rule but guide, protect, and uplift. Mothers in the city whispered blessings when he passed. Fathers pointed him out to their sons as an example. Even the elderly said their lives felt fuller, knowing he would one day ascend the throne. Dasharatha's sorrow had vanished, replaced by pride. He had wished for sons, but what he had received was more than he could have dreamed. For in Rama he saw not only the strength of a warrior, but also the heart of a sage. In Bharata he saw loyalty, in Lakshmana fiery courage, in Shatrughna devotion. The kingdom seemed more secure than ever, with the four princes embodying every quality a dynasty could hope for. Life in Ayodhya flowed on, the days steady, the nights peaceful. Festivals were celebrated with grandeur, the markets bustled, the temples thrived. Yet, as with all great stories, the calm before the storm is never meant to last. Somewhere beyond the forests and mountains, forces were stirring, shadows gathering, destinies weaving themselves into a path that would test the strength of the princes and the very soul of Ayodhya. But for now, in these earliest years, the city rested in joy. The cries of children had turned to laughter, the silence of the palace had been replaced with music, and the hearts of the people beat as one with the family of their king. And so the story begins, with a city bathed in prosperity, a king finally free of sorrow, and four brothers whose lives would soon step into legend. This is the journey of the Ramayana. The years in Ayodhya passed quietly, yet swiftly, and the young princes grew with a mixture of strength, curiosity, and a deep sense of purpose. Rama, already marked by a calm dignity in his earliest years, began to show the discipline and courage that would define his life. His brother, Lakshmana, was ever at his side, and together they explored the forests near Ayodhya, learning the ways of the world in the safety of their father's lands. It was during these years that sage Vishwamitra, a man of great wisdom and immense spiritual power, came to Ayodhya. His presence was both awe-inspiring and formidable. He had performed long austerities in forests untouched by humans, seeking understanding and enlightenment. Yet even sages of such stature carried their burdens. Vishwamitra approached King Dasharatha with a request. He needed warriors to protect his sacred rituals from marauding demons, beings who disrupted the flow of dharma, the cosmic order. Dasharatha, trusting the sage's judgment and knowing the potential of his sons, agreed. Rama and Lakshmana were called to serve the sage, and with hearts both eager and respectful, they prepared to leave the comforts of their palace. The city of Ayodhya watched silently as the princes departed, walking with steady steps into the forests, guided by the wisdom of Vishwamitra and the promise of unseen adventures. Under Vishwamitra's tutelage, Rama and Lakshmana learned not only the art of warfare but also the subtleties of devotion and dharma. The sage taught them incantations and the use of divine weapons, knowledge that would remain hidden from ordinary men. Days were spent in meditation and instruction, nights in vigilance and practice. The forest around them became a classroom, where the rustling leaves and distant animal calls marked the passage of time. It was not long before they encountered their first test. A demoness named Tataka had begun terrorizing the region, preying on travelers and disrupting the balance of the forest. She was enormous, fierce, and terrifying, yet Rama faced her without hesitation. With Lakshmana at his side, he struck true with his bow, guided by the lessons Vishwamitra had imparted. The battle was swift, and the demoness fell, a reminder that even in youth, Rama's skill and courage were extraordinary. As the days passed, the princes continued to protect the sage's sacred rituals from other threats. Wild creatures, malevolent spirits, and lesser demons who sought to disturb the sanctity of the holy grounds. Each encounter strengthened their bond with the sage and deepened their understanding of responsibility. Vishwamitra, witnessing their courage and purity of heart, knew that they were destined for greatness beyond these forests. Eventually, their journey led them toward the kingdom of Mithila, a land famed for its learned rulers and grand palaces. King Janaka, the ruler of Mithila, was renowned for his wisdom and piety. Yet he, too, faced a challenge that only the bravest of men could meet. In his palace rested a bow unlike any other, said to have belonged to Lord Shiva himself. It was massive, unyielding, and laden with divine power. The king declared that he would allow his daughter, Sita, to choose her husband through a swayamvara, a ceremony in which suitors would attempt to lift and string the bow. Those who failed would be seen as unworthy. The news of this divine challenge spread far and wide. Princes and kings from neighboring lands traveled to Mithila, drawn by the promise of marriage to Sita and the glory of lifting the great bow. Yet the task was daunting. The bow had not been bent in generations, and many who tried were injured in their attempts. The air of anticipation around the palace was thick with awe, for no ordinary mortal could even move it. Rama, guided by both courage and a sense of destiny, entered Mithila not to boast, but to honor the occasion. His presence was quiet, but commanding. Lakshmana accompanied him, ever vigilant, yet respectful of the gravity of the moment. In the halls of the palace, Rama's gaze fell upon Sita, and though they did not yet speak, a quiet recognition passed between them, as if the threads of fate themselves had begun to weave their lives together. When the moment came to attempt the vow, many had already tried and failed. Some were injured, some turned away in fear. Rama approached with calm determination. He examined the bow, its surface gleaming with an otherworldly energy. With a single deep breath, he lifted it, feeling its divine weight in his hands. Then, with steady strength and perfect focus, he strung the bow. The sound that followed was not merely the twang of wood and string. It was a resonant note that seemed to echo across kingdoms, a vibration that stirred the heart and soul of all who heard it. The crowd fell silent, awed. Then, with a motion so swift it seemed to blur, Rama released the bow. It broke in two, its divine power scattering across the palace halls. The noise rang like thunder, and in that moment it was clear to all present that the suitor before them was unlike any other. King Janaka, wise and discerning, smiled with quiet satisfaction. He had waited for someone worthy, and now he knew that Sita had found a husband of unmatched virtue and strength. The Swayamvara concluded with joy and celebration. Sita, radiant and composed, placed her hand in Rama's, sealing the bond that had been foretold by sages and whispered by destiny. The city rejoiced. The sounds of music, laughter, and ceremonial bells filled the streets of Mithila. It was not merely a union of two young hearts, but a joining that carried the weight of dharma and the promise of a future shaped by courage, devotion, and righteousness. Rama and Sita's marriage was celebrated with grandeur. Processions wound through the city, banners fluttered in the breeze, and the fragrance of flowers mingled with the crisp air. Lakshmana, always at his brother's side, shared in the happiness, while Bharata and Shatrughna, though not yet present in Mithila, would later rejoice at the news. Families, friends, and sages offered blessings, recognizing that this union was not only personal, but sacred, a convergence of divine purpose and human devotion. Yet even in these moments of joy, Rama's mind remained steady and thoughtful. He understood that life, like the forests he had traversed and the demons he had faced, was a balance of joy and duty. The bond with Sita was precious, but it came with responsibilities that would soon extend beyond the walls of the palace. Lakshmana, devoted as always, sensed the quiet depth of his brother's understanding, and together they walked the path of youth that was now intertwined with destiny. As the days settled into a rhythm of celebration and reflection, Rama and Sita began to know one another not just as husband and wife, but as companions whose thoughts and values aligned, whose hearts beat with a shared sense of purpose. Their story, still in its earliest chapters, promised challenges, adventures, and lessons that would ripple far beyond the borders of Mithila. And so, the stage was set. Rama, the noble prince of Ayodhya, trained by sages, tested by demons, and chosen by destiny, had found his partner in Sita, whose own courage and grace would shine through trials to come. The world seemed vast and full of possibility, yet already fate had begun its quiet weaving, setting the threads of exile, struggle, and triumph into motion. The people of Mithila rejoiced, the forests whispered of unseen powers, and somewhere in the distance the currents of destiny stirred. Rama and Sita had taken their first steps together into a story that would echo across time, a tale of devotion, honor, courage, and love that would endure for generations, shaping the hearts of those who listened, long after the celebrations had faded and the stars shone quietly above the city of Mithila. Ayodhya, the city of golden spires and gentle riverbanks, had been alive with celebration not long ago. The marriage of Rama and Sita had brought joy to every corner of the kingdom. and for a time the streets echoed with music and laughter. Yet, as is often the way in the weaving of destiny, moments of happiness are sometimes followed by shadows that arrive quietly, unnoticed at first, but with consequences that ripple far and wide. Within the palace walls, Queen Kaikeyi walked the corridors with a composed face, though her heart carried both ambition and fear. She had long been Dasharatha's consort, devoted yet mindful of her own influence in the kingdom. Over time, her thoughts had become entangled with promises once made in a moment of favor by the king, promises that until now had remained unspoken. She remembered the assurances of her youth when Dasharatha, out of love and gratitude, had pledged to grant her 2 boons whenever she might choose to ask. The time came, and Kaikeyi decided to claim those boons. She chose with calculated precision one to secure the throne for her own son Bharata, and the second to ensure that Rama, the eldest and beloved heir, would spend 14 years in exile. Her request fell upon the ears of King Dasharatha like a sudden storm breaking the calm of a sunlit day. For the king, Rama was not merely a son, he was the embodiment of virtue, the light of Ayodhya, the hope of his dynasty. The demand pierced him, and yet he found himself bound by honor and by the weight of a promise he had once made. Rama, when he heard of Kaikeyi's boons, remained serene. His acceptance was neither reluctant nor resentful. It was quiet, almost meditative. He understood that life unfolds in ways beyond one's control, and that dharma, the path of righteousness, sometimes requires personal sacrifice. To walk the path of duty, even at great cost, was a lesson he had been prepared for since birth. Sita, sensing the calm determination in her husband's heart, mirrored his resolve. She chose to accompany him into the forest, unwilling to live apart from the one whose destiny was now intertwined with hers. Lakshmana, bound by devotion to his elder brother, insisted on joining them, leaving the palace walls with hearts heavy but steadfast. The city of Ayodhya, usually vibrant and alive, sank into mourning as the word of Rama's exile spread. Citizens gathered in silent grief, unable to reconcile the joy of the recent celebrations with the sorrow now touching their lives. Servants who had known Rama since his earliest days wept quietly in courtyards. Priests who had guided the king through rituals and ceremonies prayed for the safety of the exiled prince. Even the animals of the palace seemed to sense a shift in the air, as if the very heartbeat of the city had slowed. Dasharatha, stricken by grief and the consequences of Kaikeyi's demands, fell into sorrow that would not relent. The halls of the palace, once filled with laughter and music, became shadowed with silence. He wandered from chamber to chamber, a king undone by the twists of fate and the pain of losing his beloved son to exile. The king's body, heavy with grief, could no longer endure, and in the quiet hours of the night he passed away, leaving Ayodhya in mourning and leaving Bharata with a heart torn between duty and loyalty. Bharata, returning from his mother's influence, found the city steeped in sorrow and the throne empty. Yet his first thoughts were not of power, but of his elder brother, Rama, now wandering in the forests far from the comforts of the palace. The sight of the crown, once the symbol of rulership and pride, now seemed meaningless in his hands. He could not accept the throne as if Rama's exile were a rightful passage. Instead, he vowed to honor his brother in every way, to keep the kingdom in trust for him, and to wait patiently for the day when Rama would return. With a mixture of determination and sorrow, Bharata set out to find Rama. The forests, dense and shadowed, were a world apart from the golden streets of Ayodhya. He walked among trees whose branches whispered with the wind, through clearings where deer paused to watch his passage, and across rivers that mirrored the sky in quiet reflection. When Bharata finally found Rama, he fell to his knees, pleading with him to return and claim the throne. But Rama's calm resolve remained unchanged. The exile, though harsh, was a path of dharma, and it was not to be broken by tears or pleas. Understanding the steadfastness of his brother, Bharata took a sandal carved from gold and placed it upon the throne of Ayodhya. In doing so, he symbolically ruled in Rama's name, a regent with no desire for personal power, merely to maintain the order and well-being of the kingdom. He would not sit in indulgence, he would not enjoy the comforts that had been denied to Rama. Instead, Bharata lived austerely, often gazing at the horizon, thinking of his brother and the time when the prince would return. Meanwhile, Rama, Sita and Lakshmana journeyed deeper into the forests. Their departure was not marked by sorrow alone, it was also a beginning, the opening of a chapter in which courage, endurance and wisdom would be tested. The forest, vast and untamed, was alive with sounds of birds, the rustle of leaves and the quiet flow of streams. Every step brought them further from the familiar comforts of Ayodhya and closer to experiences that would shape them in ways unimaginable. Sita walked beside Rama with grace and quiet strength. Though the forest was unfamiliar and though the comforts of the palace were gone, she remained undaunted. Her loyalty was unwavering, and her presence brought a sense of balance and serenity to Rama, reinforcing his own determination. Lakshmana, ever vigilant, scanned the forest, noting signs of potential danger, yet also finding wonder in the birdsong, the fragrance of flowers, and the small miracles of the wilderness. Days turned into weeks, and the trio settled into the rhythm of forest life. They built shelters, gathered food, and learned to live in harmony with the land. The trees offered shade, the rivers provided water, and the solitude allowed reflection. Yet even as the forest life demanded adaptation, Rama's mind remained attentive to duty, aware that their exile was not merely a removal from the throne, but a preparation for trials yet to come. Back in Ayodhya, Bharata's governance maintained the city's prosperity and peace, but his heart remained tethered to the forests where Rama walked. He wrote letters, sent messages through trusted emissaries, and lived each day in quiet anticipation of his brother's return. The people respected him deeply, not merely for his restraint and wisdom, but for the visible love and loyalty he held for the one who was absent. His devotion was not ceremonial, it was lived, felt in the way he moved among the streets, in the care with which he made decisions, and in the quiet longing in his eyes. The story of exile, though born of sorrow, was also a story of character. Rama's calm acceptance, Sita's steadfastness, and Lakshmana's loyalty illustrated virtues that would guide them through future trials. Bharata's refusal of the throne underscored the difference between ambition and responsibility, and Ayodhya, even in grief, remained a city whose people carried hope, knowing that the prince in the forest embodied the promise of return, of justice, and of the restoration of harmony. And so the stage was set for years that would stretch across forests, mountains and rivers, a period of quiet endurance, hidden lessons, and preparation for challenges that lay beyond sight. The exile was not merely a punishment, it was the shaping of character, the testing of hearts, and the quiet forging of destiny. Rama, Sita, and Lakshmana walked onward, each step a testament to the strength of principle, to the power of devotion, and to the endurance of love and duty, even when the path was uncertain and the future veiled in shadow. The Dandaka forest stretched endlessly, a vast realm of green shadows, winding rivers, and towering trees whose branches wove a dense canopy above. It was a world apart from the golden streets of Ayodhya, untamed, mysterious, and alive with the whispers of creatures both seen and unseen. Rama, Sita, and Lakshmana moved carefully through this wilderness, learning to navigate a life dictated by the rhythms of nature. Each day brought new lessons. The air smelled of damp earth and wildflowers. The calls of birds echoed through the treetops, and rivers, clear and cold, offered both sustenance and solace. The forest was generous, yet demanding. Food had to be gathered or hunted, shelter constructed from fallen branches and leaves, and dangers met with alertness and caution. The trio adapted quickly, their skills and wisdom deepening with each passing day. Rama's calmness and judgment guided them, Sita's patience and intelligence ensured harmony, and Lakshmana's vigilance provided protection. Together they forged a small sanctuary amid the wilderness, a semblance of home in a world that tested them constantly. Their journey through Dandaka also brought encounters with sages, wandering ascetics, and holy men who had chosen the solitude of the forest over the grandeur of palaces. These sages, impressed by Rama's composure and understanding, welcomed him with respect and offered guidance in spiritual matters. From them, Rama and Lakshmana learned the intricate rituals, chants, and disciplines that kept the balance of dharma intact, even in the remotest corners of the world. Sita, too, listened carefully, absorbing wisdom with quiet grace, her presence a reminder that knowledge and virtue were inseparable. Yet the forest was not only a sanctuary for those who sought peace. Dark forces moved through its shadows, demons, rakshasas, and malevolent spirits who thrived in isolation, preying on travelers and disturbing sacred rites. Rama and Lakshmana, guided by both skill and the blessings of sages, confronted these beings with courage. Each encounter tested their strength, patience, and understanding of dharma. The demons were powerful and cunning, yet Rama's composure and Lakshmana's bravery turned each challenge into a lesson in restraint, focus, and strategy. The forest, in its vastness, became both a teacher and a proving ground. After many days of wandering, the trio reached a region known as Panchavati. It was a place of serene beauty, bordered by the Godavari River and dotted with groves of fruit-bearing trees. Here the forest seemed gentler, the land fertile and welcoming. Rama, sensing the suitability of the area for their long-term stay, decided to establish a dwelling. They built simple shelters beneath the trees, using materials from the forest without disturbing its balance. The rivers offered water, the trees provided shade and fruit, and the quiet of the grove brought a sense of stability amidst the uncertainty of exile. Panchavati became their home, modest, harmonious, and connected to the rhythms of the natural world. Life in Panchavati was peaceful, yet the calm was fragile, for the threads of destiny had begun to weave new complications. Among the distant hills, eyes watched the forest with growing interest. One of those eyes belonged to Shurpanakha, the sister of Ravana, the demon king of Lanka. Her reputation as cunning, ambitious, and unpredictable preceded her, and she wandered the forest seeking both amusement and opportunity. When she first glimpsed Rama and Lakshmana, she was struck not only by their strength and composure, but by their serene presence, qualities that stirred desires and ambitions of her own. Shurpanakha approached the brothers with a mixture of boldness and charm. She spoke to Rama, attempting to entice him with flattery and promises, her words dripping with calculated intent. Rama, ever calm and respectful, listened, but did not waver. He explained gently, yet firmly, that his heart and his life were bound to Sita, his devoted companion. There was no space for distraction or indulgence, for duty and virtue came before personal temptation. Not deterred, Shurpanakha turned her attention to Lakshmana, hoping to find in him a less steadfast spirit. But Lakshmana too recognized her intentions and responded with the same calm firmness, making it clear that her advances would find no purchase. Frustrated and in angered vanity, Shurpanakha revealed her true form, fearsome, exaggerated, and demonic. Her transformation was intended to intimidate, to assert dominance, and perhaps to terrify the trio into submission. Yet even in her fearsome guise, Rama and Lakshmana remained composed. Lakshmana acted swiftly, not out of cruelty, but in the defense of dharma. With a precise strike, he cut off Shurpanakha's nose and ears, symbols of her aggression and malice. Humiliated and enraged, she fled into the forest, nursing both her pain and her anger. The event, though small in the grand scale of the world, would have far-reaching consequences. She returned to Lanka, her report of the humiliation of her brother's sister fueling Ravana's pride and planting the first seeds of vengeance. Back in Panchavati, life returned to a quiet rhythm. Rama, Sita, and Lakshmana continued their days in simplicity, observing the cycles of the forest, learning its secret, and finding harmony within its vast expanse. They encountered sages who offered insight into the deeper workings of the world, from the movement of stars to the hidden properties of plants and rivers. Demons continued to challenge them, yet each trial strengthened their bond and honed their skills. The forest became both a sanctuary and a crucible, shaping them into figures of wisdom, courage, and resilience. Sita, in particular, adjusted to forest life with grace. She tended to the small household tasks, gathered fruits, and assisted in maintaining their shelter. She walked alongside Rama with devotion, her presence a source of comfort and moral support. Her keen awareness of both the dangers and the beauty of the forest allowed them to avoid many perils, and her insight often complemented Rama's judgment in decisions that affected their safety and well-being. Lakshmana, protective and observant, moved as a shadow around them, ever ready to intercept threats and guide them safely through unfamiliar territory. The brothers' unity, combined with Sita's wisdom and composure, created a harmony that was rare even in the most disciplined families. Each day they learned not only the practical skills of survival, but also the deeper understanding of duty, courage, and the subtle interplay between power and restraint. Yet the threat from Lanka loomed ever larger. Shurpanakha's return had ignited a spark in her brother Ravana, a demon king whose power was immense and whose desire for domination knew no bounds. The news of her humiliation, coupled with his own pride and curiosity, began to stir a chain of events that would soon reach the quiet groves of Panchavati. The forest, though serene, could not remain untouched by the distant ambitions and anger of those who lived beyond its borders. In these days of calm vigilance, the trio's lives in Panchavati became a mixture of peace and preparation. The forest offered freedom, yet it demanded alertness, solitude, yet it required community among the sages and creatures they encountered. Rama's judgment remained steady, Sita's composure constant, and Lakshmana's protection unwavering. Together they embodied the balance of strength, love, and wisdom, even as the forces gathering in distant lands began to cast long shadows over their tranquil existence. And so, the stage was quietly set for the next chapters of their journey. Panchavati became more than a forest dwelling. It became a living witness to virtue, courage, and the quiet shaping of destiny. The presence of sages, the trials imposed by demons, and the distant anger of Ravana all whispered of the challenges yet to come. Rama, Sita, and Lakshmana, unaware of the full scope of the trials awaiting them, continued their lives in rhythm with the forest, each day a step toward the larger destiny that fate had begun to unfold. The quiet life of Panchavati flowed with a rhythm of simplicity and serenity. Rama, Sita, and Lakshmana moved through the days with a harmony that the forest seemed to recognize. Yet, destiny often chooses the quietest moments to stir the greatest upheaval. One day, as they wandered near the edge of the grove, a creature of extraordinary beauty appeared among the trees. A golden deer. Its coat shimmered like sunlight on a river, and its eyes seemed to carry a mysterious, almost hypnotic glow. Sita, entranced by the creature, called out to Rama. The deer moved with elegance, its leaps almost musical, and seemed to beckon her, drawing her attention with its playful movements. Rama, cautious and aware, urged Sita to remain calm, suspecting that such a beautiful creature in a forest known for trickery might not be what it seemed. Yet the allure was powerful. Sita's curiosity and gentle nature could not resist its charm. The deer's presence, though silent in intent, was the first thread of a web that was beginning to tighten around them. Rama, always vigilant, followed the deer, observing its movements with quiet suspicion. Lakshmana stayed close to Sita, guarding her, yet the creature's uncanny behavior led them further into the forest, away from the relative safety of their grove. Unbeknownst to them, the deer was not an ordinary animal. It was Maricha, a demon of cunning and guile transformed by magic to serve a darker purpose. His golden coat was an illusion, a lure designed to separate Rama from Sita, to create an opening for a plan that had been set in motion long before. As Rama pursued the golden deer, Maricha led him away from the grove, his movements calculated and precise. The deeper they went, the more Rama realized the trickery at hand. Yet, even in recognition of the danger, he understood that Sita's fascination with the creature could not be ignored. He attempted to strike the deer, and in a final tragic act of deception, Maricha cried out in Rama's voice, calling for help. Sita, terrified at the apparent peril of her husband, urged Lakshmana to go to Rama's aid. Reluctantly, Lakshmana left her, placing a protective circle around their dwelling and marking the boundary beyond which she should not step. He left with the understanding that Rama could handle the danger, trusting in his strength and skill. But the forest had shifted in tone, the air grew tense, the trees seemed to lean closer, and the shadows stretched as though alive. Within this quiet tension, the stage for one of the most tragic events of their lives was set. Ravana, the demon king of Lanka, had long desired Sita. Her beauty, virtue, and devotion had reached him across distant lands, and he had conceived a plan to possess her. Disguised as a humble mendicant, he approached the grove, walking with slow, deliberate steps. His posture was of a man seeking alms, his voice soft and deferential, his appearance entirely unthreatening. He presented himself to Sita, asking for food and shelter, and spoke of the hardships of a wandering life. Sita, ever compassionate and unafraid, stepped forward to offer him assistance. She had been raised to see the good in all beings, and her sense of dharma dictated kindness even to strangers. Yet, in this simple act of generosity lay the danger. Ravana's eyes gleamed with concealed intent. The forest seemed to hold its breath as he approached, knowing that in his presence the quiet of Panchavati would be shattered. With sudden force, Ravana revealed his true form. His body towered over the grove, his multiple heads striking fear into any who beheld him, and his voice roared like thunder through the trees. Sita's cry echoed through the forest, and the birds took flight, their calls a frantic chorus to accompany the chaos unfolding. Rama, though powerful, was still separated by distance, and Lakshmana's protective circle could not reach beyond the boundary he had drawn. In that moment, Sita was vulnerable, and Ravana seized his chance. He lifted her from the grove, swift and unstoppable, carrying her toward his distant kingdom in Lanka. Her screams were met only by the rustle of leaves and the flowing river, as the forest could only witness, not intervene. The tragedy struck with suddenness that left the grove silent in its aftermath, a hush that seemed to mourn the innocence that had been taken. Yet, even in these desperate moments, courage and loyalty appeared in unexpected forms. Jatayu, the great vulture who had long served the forces of good, saw Ravana flying away with Sita. With fierce determination, he rose into the sky, wings cutting through the wind, and confronted the demon king. A battle ensued above the treetops, a struggle of strength and will. Jatayu struck with talons and beak, trying to stop the abduction, yet Ravana's might was overwhelming. Though the vulture fought valiantly, he was ultimately wounded, falling to the earth as Ravana continued on his flight toward Lanka. The forest, once a haven of peace and quiet, now held a sense of grief and mourning. The trio's dwelling, though intact, felt emptier, its calm shattered by the sudden absence of Sita. Rama returned, having overcome the illusions of Maricha, only to discover the aftermath. The golden deer revealed in its true form the signs of the struggle and the absence of Sita. His heart sank, not with despair that would paralyze him, but with a deep, searing anguish that weighed upon his every thought. Sita's absence transformed the grove into a place of silent reflection. The rivers continued to flow, the trees continued to sway, yet the presence of emptiness was felt in every rustle, every bird call. Rama knelt, gathering himself, his mind moving swiftly beyond grief to resolve. He understood that sorrow alone would not restore her, that action, strategy, and alliances would be required to retrieve her from the power of a being as formidable as Ravana. Lakshmana returned, witnessing the devastation of the grove and the grief of his brother. He did not hesitate to embrace Rama, not only in comfort, but in solidarity, recognizing that their bond, tested now more than ever, would be the anchor that guided them through the trials ahead. Together they surveyed the forest, tracing the signs of the abduction, noting the subtle indications left by Ravana's flight, and considering the path that destiny had laid before them. The golden deer, Maricha, lay fallen in its true form, the final act of deception revealed. The forest, a silent witness to the events, seemed to absorb the tension, preparing the landscape for the journey that would soon begin. A journey not merely through the physical realm of forests and mountains, but through the moral and spiritual challenges that defined the nature of duty, courage, and love. Rama's anguish was tempered by resolve. He knew the path forward would require allies, wisdom, and endurance. The abduction of Sita, though a moment of profound loss, marked the beginning of a larger struggle, a confrontation with forces of darkness whose reach extended far beyond the boundaries of Panchavati. Yet even in the shadow of this calamity, the seeds of hope and action took root, guided by the unwavering bonds of devotion and the clarity of purpose that had always defined Rama. And so the forest of Panchavati, once a quiet sanctuary, became the backdrop for the first great trial of Rama's life in exile. The golden deer, the cunning of Maricha, the sudden violence of Ravana, and the brave intervention of Jatayu all converged to mark a turning point. The calm, harmonious rhythm of daily life had ended, replaced by the urgent demands of courage, strategy, and the pursuit of justice. Even as night fell over the grove, the stars above bore silent witness. The distant cries of the forest creatures mingled with the soft rustle of leaves, reminding the brothers that though sorrow had touched their hearts, the journey was only beginning. The abduction of Sita was not the end of the story. It was the spark that would ignite a chain of events leading Rama and Lakshmana through forests across rivers, and eventually toward an encounter with allies' enemies and the trials that would define the epic of their lives. The forest stretched endlessly before Rama and Lakshmana, vast and uncharted, a maze of trees, rivers, and hidden glades. Yet the pain of Sita's absence drove them onward. Each step was fueled by determination, each pause filled with reflection on the events that had shattered the quiet of Panchavati. Rama, resolute and composed even in anguish, understood that the forest, though imposing, held allies and signs if one knew where to look. Lakshmana, ever loyal, remained vigilant, scanning the shadows for threats while sharing in the burden of planning their search. In the midst of these wandering days, they encountered a being unlike any other they had met. His form was agile and strong, his eyes bright with intelligence, and his presence radiated both courage and devotion. This was Hanuman, a Vanara, or monkey, of extraordinary power and wisdom. Though young and energetic, he carried the poise of one accustomed to the wilds of the forest. He approached Rama and Lakshmana cautiously, but with curiosity, sensing a purpose and nobility in them that resonated with his own values. The meeting was quiet at first. Words were exchanged with care, each observing the other's intent and spirit. Rama, speaking with calm authority, shared the story of Sita's abduction, of Ravana's treachery, and of their journey to bring her back. Hanuman listened intently, his heart moved by the devotion Rama and Lakshmana carried for one another and for Sita. In turn, he shared knowledge of the Vanara clans, their territories, and the struggles they faced under their own internal divisions. There was immediate recognition, the alignment of purpose that would forge a powerful alliance. Hanuman spoke of Sugriva, the exiled king of the Vanaras, who had been driven from his throne by his elder brother, Vali. The brothers' rivalry had fractured the monkey kingdom, leaving Sugriva isolated and vulnerable. Yet he was strong, courageous, and wise, qualities that could prove invaluable to Rama's quest. It was Hanuman's suggestion to seek out Sugriva that began the next stage of the journey. Guided by Hanuman's knowledge of the terrain, Rama and Lakshmana moved swiftly and deliberately, traversing forests, crossing rivers, and scaling hills in pursuit of their goal. The encounter with Sugriva was marked by caution and diplomacy. The exiled king, suspicious at first, observed Rama carefully, measuring the depth of his resolve and the strength of his character. Sugriva, despite his exile, carried the dignity of a ruler and the fire of one wronged. When Rama offered his assistance in reclaiming the throne, Sugriva's heart recognized the sincerity in the words, and a pact was formed. Rama pledged to aid Sugriva in defeating Vali, and in return, Sugriva promised to marshal his army in the search for Sita. The bond, sealed with respect and a shared understanding of duty, became the foundation for an alliance that would change the course of the quest. Preparation for the confrontation with Vali was meticulous. Rama and Lakshmana observed the movements of the enemy, understood the terrain of the kingdom, and planned the engagement with care. Sugriva's own forces, though valiant, had been weakened by internal strife, and Vali's strength was legendary. Yet Rama, guided by dharma and aided by strategy, determined the precise moment to act. With Lakshmana at his side, he approached the battlefield, calm and composed, while Sugriva's forces followed with both hope and trepidation. The encounter with Vali unfolded swiftly. Rama, using his unmatched skill with the bow, engaged from a distance, striking Vali with precision that left him disoriented and vulnerable. Lakshmana guarded against any flank or counterattack, while Sugriva observed, ready to reclaim his throne. The battle was decisive. Vali, despite his strength, could not withstand the combination of Rama's strategy and Sugriva's courage. In the aftermath, Sugriva was restored to his rightful position as king of the Vanaras. The people rejoiced, and the air itself seemed to exhale relief, as though the forest recognized the restoration of balance. With the throne regained, Sugriva's forces could now turn their attention fully to the search for Sita. The army of Vanaras, strong, agile, and loyal, prepared to sweep across forests, mountains, and rivers in pursuit of the missing princess. Plans were made, scouts were dispatched, and strategies discussed in the cool shade of ancient trees. Hanuman, as both messenger and guide, became instrumental in coordinating these efforts. His knowledge of distant lands, his loyalty to Rama, and his extraordinary abilities made him indispensable. Rama, though still burdened by grief, moved among the Vanara forces with a quiet authority. He spoke little, yet each word carried weight, each gesture inspired confidence. Lakshmana, ever watchful, ensured that discipline and focus were maintained. The atmosphere, though tense with the anticipation of action, was one of unity and shared purpose. The Vanaras, sensing the presence of someone whose virtue and strength transcended ordinary men, responded with unwavering loyalty. As preparations continued, Rama took a moment to reflect on the journey that had brought them here. From the tranquil groves of Panchavati to the harsh deceptions of Ravana, the path had been marked by challenges that tested both courage and morality. The alliance with Sugriva and the commitment of the Vanara army represented a turning point. The search for Sita would now be an organized, purposeful endeavor, guided by intelligence, strategy, and devotion. Hanuman, energetic and perceptive, moved between the troops, ensuring readiness and relaying Rama's instructions. His devotion was not merely duty-bound, it was inspired by the deep sense of justice and righteousness that Rama embodied. The army's morale, often fragile in times of uncertainty, was strengthened by his presence. Every Vanara, from the smallest scout to the largest warrior, understood that their role was not only to find Sita, but to participate in a mission that carried cosmic significance. Rama's interactions with Sugriva also underscored the importance of trust and honor. The exiled king, restored to his throne, now had both opportunity and responsibility. Yet he remained humble, mindful that his kingdom's stability was intertwined with the success of Rama's quest. Together they forged a leadership dynamic that balanced power with wisdom, strength with moral guidance. The forest, in its quiet expanses, seemed to acknowledge the harmony now achieved among the allied forces. The search strategy was set. Scouts would fan out in multiple directions, following trails, observing signs, and reporting any information about Sita's whereabouts. Rama and Lakshmana would lead key expeditions supported by Hanuman and the elite Vanara warriors. The preparation was thorough, designed to maximize the probability of success while minimizing unnecessary risk. The forest, once a place of refuge, was now a stage for action, a network of paths and observation points that would guide the army in its critical mission. Even as the plan solidified, Rama and Lakshmana remained attuned to the human and emotional dimensions of their journey. The loss of Sita weighed heavily, yet it also strengthened their resolve, reminding them that every step taken, every decision made, carried consequences far beyond the immediate moment. Hanuman's presence, Sugriva's support, and the loyalty of the Vanara army combined to create an environment where both strategy and moral purpose aligned, setting the stage for the pivotal events to come. And so, in the dense forests and hidden valleys, the search for Sita began in earnest. The alliance of humans and Vanaras, the restoration of Sugriva's throne, and the disciplined preparation of the army marked a shift in the journey, from despair to action, from sorrow to strategic pursuit. The forest, vast and filled with both peril and promise, held the echoes of footsteps, the rustle of leaves, and the silent anticipation of an adventure that would carry across mountains, rivers, and ultimately to the shores of Lanka, where the confrontation with Ravana awaited. The first steps had been taken, guided by duty, devotion, and the unshakable bond of loyalty. Rama, Lakshmana, Sugriva, and Hanuman moved forward with clarity and purpose, each aware that the journey ahead would test courage, wisdom, and endurance. The forest, once merely a backdrop, had become both a classroom and a proving ground, shaping the strategies, skills, and alliances that would be critical in the days to come. The sea stretched endlessly before Hanuman, a vast expanse of blue that seemed to merge with the sky at the horizon. Waves rose and fell in rhythmic, eternal motion, their roar both terrifying and mesmerizing. The wind carried the salt of the ocean, and the sunlight danced upon the water, reflecting a brilliance that was at once beautiful and overwhelming. Yet Hanuman, undeterred by the immensity of the ocean, stood poised, muscles tensed, mind focused. His purpose was singular: to find Sita, to discover her location, and to bring hope to Rama's heart. For a moment, the world seemed to pause. The gulls wheeled overhead, the waves whispered against the shore, and the distant mountains framed the horizon. Hanuman's heart, steady and resolute, beat in time with the rhythm of destiny. He measured the leap not with fear, but with confidence born of courage and devotion. The forest behind him, the lands he had traversed to reach the coast, now fell away, and only the vastness of the ocean remained between him and Lanka, the city where Sita was held. As he prepared to take flight, the ocean itself seemed to rise in challenge. Currents twisted and swirled, creating illusions of obstacles and fears. Hanuman's mind, however, was unwavering. He recalled the guidance of Rama, the trust of Sugriva, and the urgency of the mission. With a bound that seemed to lift him beyond mortal limits, he launched himself into the air. The wind rushed past, carrying him forward, and the waves below became a blur of motion. Every beat of his wings, every movement of his limbs was precise and deliberate, the embodiment of determination in action. Yet the journey was not without trial. Surasa, a mighty serpent, emerged from the depths of the ocean, her form immense and her eyes sharp with challenge. She sought to test Hanuman, to demand that he submit or face peril. Yet Hanuman, calm and intelligent, did not attack blindly. He recognized that this encounter, like so many others in his life, was a test of wit and resolve. With cleverness and composure, he respected the serpent's power while finding a way to continue his path. Surasa, impressed by his ingenuity, allowed him to pass, her coils retreating beneath the waves. Further along, another challenge awaited. Simika, a demoness with the power to seize those who passed overhead, reached for Hanuman with her shadowy, grasping hands. She sought to capture him, to end his journey before it could reach its purpose. Yet, as with Surasa, Hanuman remained calm, aware of the danger, and acted with precision. He struck swiftly, avoiding harm to the natural order, while neutralizing the threat. The encounter passed, and the air around him seemed to grow lighter, as though acknowledging his cleverness and determination. The ocean, vast and intimidating, gradually gave way to the distant outline of land. Lanka appeared on the horizon, its golden spires and towering walls shimmering in the sunlight. The city was immense, unlike any Hanuman had seen before, a fortress of power, wealth, and meticulous design. From his vantage above, he marveled at the beauty of the architecture, the symmetry of the streets, and the sense of order that belied the tyranny that ruled within. His awe was tempered by purpose, for every step of observation reminded him that within this splendor, Sita waited, enduring hardship with steadfast courage. As he approached the walls, Hanuman surveyed the fortifications, noting the guards, the watchtowers, and the wide gates. The city, though imposing, could not intimidate him. His mind remained fixed on the mission, his heart filled with devotion. Within the walls, the palaces gleamed with gold, the courtyards were busy with activity, yet Hanuman's attention was drawn to a quieter, shadowed grove. The Ashoka Grove. It was there, among the flowering trees and shaded pathways, that Sita resided, held against her will, yet unbroken in spirit. From a distance, he observed her form. Sita, regal and composed, moved with grace even in captivity. Her eyes, though filled with sorrow, carried a strength that reflected both her inner resolve and the unwavering love she bore for Rama. She walked among the trees, tended to the surroundings as best she could, and resisted despair, embodying a calm courage that seemed to illuminate the grove despite the darkness of her circumstances. Hanuman's heart swelled with both admiration and determination. He approached cautiously, mindful of the guards and the risk of revealing his presence too soon. Yet he knew that reassurance was needed. Sita, though strong, needed a reminder that she was not alone, that Rama's devotion had not faltered, and that help had arrived in a form both extraordinary and loyal. When he finally revealed himself, he spoke gently, introducing himself as Rama's messenger and protector. His presence was imposing, yet his words carried kindness and respect. Sita, initially startled, recognized the devotion in his eyes and the sincerity in his voice. Her fear eased slightly, replaced by cautious hope. She listened as Hanuman spoke of Rama's anguish, of his determination to rescue her, and of the alliance that had been formed to bring her back to safety. Sita's response was measured, her composure unwavering. She spoke of her resolve to remain steadfast, of the moral principles that guided her conduct even in captivity, and of her faith in Rama's ability to overcome the obstacles before him. Yet, within her words was also the acknowledgement of fear, a natural human response to the uncertainty and power of Ravana, a king whose might seemed boundless within the walls of Lanka. Hanuman offered reassurance, not only through words, but through presence. He described the preparations being made by the Vanara army, the alliances forged, and the plans set in motion. He emphasized that the journey to rescue her was guided by strategy, courage, and devotion, and that every effort was being made to ensure her safety. In his calm, deliberate manner, he bridged the distance between despair and hope, reminding her that she was not isolated, that the forces of dharma were aligned in her favor. Sita, feeling the truth of his words, allowed herself a moment of relief. Though the path ahead remained perilous, the knowledge that Rama's reach extended even here, through Hanuman, provided a spark of light in the darkness. Her steadfastness, long tested, was now met with tangible action, a reminder that virtue and courage, even when challenged, could inspire loyalty and action beyond the confines of one's immediate surroundings. Hanuman spent time observing the grove, noting the structure of the Ashoka gardens, the positions of the guards, and the best methods to communicate back to Rama. Every detail was absorbed, every precaution considered. His intelligence, combined with his physical prowess, made him uniquely capable of both understanding the challenge and executing the necessary steps to ensure Sita's eventual rescue. As night fell over Lanka, the city bathed in the golden glow of lanterns, Hanuman prepared to return to Rama. The journey back, like the leap across the ocean, required vigilance and precision. Yet he carried with him the knowledge of Sita's condition, her unwavering spirit, and the clear confirmation that the mission was not only necessary, but achievable. The forest, the seas, and the distant lands had borne witness to his journey, and now the stage was set for the strategies and alliances that would culminate in the great battle to come. And so Hanuman, messenger and devotee, began the journey back across the ocean. The waves whispered beneath him, the wind carried him forward, and the stars above bore witness to his flight. Sita, in the quiet Ashoka grove, watched him depart, her heart steady yet filled with hope, knowing that the force of righteousness had already reached her, and that Rama's devotion would guide the coming events to their destined conclusion. The night in Lanka was heavy and still, yet beneath the golden glow of its lanterns an energy stirred that the city's inhabitants could scarcely understand. Hanuman moved with deliberate purpose through the Ashoka grove, his mind sharp, his senses keen. The grove, once a place of constrained beauty, became his instrument of communication. With swift, calculated actions, he destroyed the demon fortifications and sent a message of defiance to Ravana, the king who had dared to challenge Dharma by holding Sita captive. Trees were uprooted, walls breached, and hidden passages revealed, a display both of strength and intent. Each act was precise, avoiding unnecessary harm to Sita while demonstrating the consequences of tyranny. The sound of destruction echoed across the gardens, awakening guards and servants alike. Alarms spread quickly through Lanka. The demonesses and soldiers, many of whom had never faced an adversary like Hanuman, scrambled to contain the chaos. Yet for all their numbers, they could not subdue him. His movements were swift and unpredictable, guided by a combination of intelligence, agility, and extraordinary power. In this display, Hanuman sent a clear message. The forces of righteousness would not be ignored, and the consequences of injustice were immediate and unavoidable. Despite his overwhelming skill, Hanuman allowed himself to be captured, recognizing that presenting himself directly to Ravana would serve a greater purpose. The guards, unaware of his true strength, bound him and led him through the city to the royal palace. Every step was a study in restraint and awareness, his mind focused on the goal rather than on escape. Within the palace, the grandeur of Lanka's halls contrasted sharply with the moral decay that resided within its walls. Gold and jewels shimmered in the torchlight, but the air carried the tension of fear and arrogance intermingled. Ravana, seated upon his throne, regarded Hanuman with a mixture of pride, anger, and curiosity. His multiple heads shifted slightly as he measured the strength, intelligence, and audacity of the being brought before him. Hanuman, bound yet unbowed, met Ravana's gaze without fear. His calm demeanor, his unwavering focus, and the aura of moral certainty were both unsettling and impressive to the demon king. In his silence, Hanuman conveyed volumes, the strength of devotion, the power of righteousness, and the inevitability of justice. Ravana attempted persuasion, threats, and even flattery, seeking to bend Hanuman's will to test the boundaries of his resolve. Yet Hanuman's loyalty to Rama and the clarity of his mission were unshakable. Words were exchanged, sharp and deliberate, each carrying weight beyond the immediate moment. The dialogue, though brief, revealed the contrast between dharma and adharma, illustrating that power without virtue is fragile, no matter how imposing it may appear. In a fit of rage and impatience, Ravana ordered Hanuman's tail to be set ablaze. The guards, eager to demonstrate their loyalty and strength, applied fire to the long, flexible tail, expecting panic or retreat. Hanuman, however, remained composed. With a sudden, powerful movement, he freed himself and leapt into the sky, his tail ablaze like a meteor cutting through the darkness. The city below became a landscape of fire and chaos. Roofs, halls, and fortifications ignited, and the cries of demons mingled with the roar of flames. Lanka, in all its grandeur, seemed to shrink before the destructive force of Hanuman's determination. Yet, even in destruction, there was purpose. Hanuman avoided unnecessary casualties among innocents and focused his efforts on symbols of oppression and tyranny. The burning of the city was not mere vengeance. It was a vivid demonstration of the consequences of unrighteousness and a warning of the power aligned with dharma. From the towers to the walls, the city trembled under the impact of his fiery tail, and the message was clear. No fortress, no matter how vast, could withstand the force of truth and devotion. As the fires consumed structures and panic spread among the ranks of Lanka's demons, Hanuman observed with careful eyes, ensuring that Sita remained safe. The grove, which had been the focus of much of his attention, was spared from direct harm, for his mission was not destruction for its own sake, but the delivery of both warning and reassurance. In this careful balance, he exemplified the principles that guided him: courage, intelligence, and devotion tempered with wisdom. The chaos drew Ravana out once more. From his throne, he witnessed the devastation and recognized the audacity of his adversary. His pride and anger surged, yet Hanuman's composure remained unshaken. With measured words, he reminded Ravana of the consequences of hubris, of the inevitability of justice, and of the power of loyalty and devotion that could transcend even the walls of Lanka. The king, for all his might, could only watch as the messenger of Rama executed his mission with precision, leaving behind both physical destruction and moral clarity. Once the demonstration was complete, Hanuman prepared for his return. The fires continued to blaze, casting long shadows across the city, while the cries and confusion of the demon army echoed in the night. With a powerful leap, he soared over the city walls, the flames reflected in his eyes like twin suns. The night sky embraced him as he flew back across the ocean, carrying the knowledge of Sita's condition and the confirmation of her steadfastness. His mind remained focused, aware that his next step would be to report to Rama and guide the next phase of the mission. The ocean, now calm in the night, seemed to welcome his passage. Waves lapped gently against the shore, as if acknowledging the triumph of a mission completed. Hanuman's heart, though filled with the weight of what he had witnessed, was buoyed by the certainty that action aligned with dharma always carries power beyond immediate perception. He reflected on the courage of Sita, the folly of Ravana, and the necessity of patience, strategy, and devotion in the unfolding struggle. Upon reaching the forests where Rama and Lakshmana awaited, Hanuman was greeted with relief and quiet celebration. His return, though devoid of fanfare, carried the weight of crucial information. Sita was alive, steadfast, and awaiting rescue. The reports of her endurance, combined with the demonstration of Lanka's vulnerabilities, provided Rama with both clarity and hope. Hanuman, ever humble, relayed the events in measured detail, emphasizing the balance of courage, intelligence, and loyalty that had guided his actions. The Vanara army, now reassured and strategically informed, prepared for the next stage of the quest. Every detail provided by Hanuman, from the geography of Lanka to the disposition of its forces, was analyzed and integrated into the planning. The moral victory of his mission carried as much significance as the physical destruction of the city, for it demonstrated the limits of power without virtue and the unyielding strength of devotion. Rama, absorbing the news, allowed a moment of quiet reflection. The anguish of Sita's abduction was tempered by the certainty that the forces aligned with Dharma were now aware, organized, and prepared. Lakshmana, observing both Rama and Hanuman, understood that this was more than a mere scouting mission. It was a test of courage, strategy, and moral clarity, and it had been executed flawlessly. The forest, in its endless expanse, seemed to hum with approval, a silent witness to the triumph of purpose over chaos. And so, with Lanka partially ablaze behind him, and the information of Sita's location secured, Hanuman's journey concluded, leaving a trail of both literal and symbolic fire. His return marked a turning point in the quest. The rescue of Sita was no longer a distant hope, but an achievable mission guided by intelligence, devotion, and strategic preparation. The stage was set for the coming battles, where courage, wisdom, and righteousness would be tested in ways that would echo across forests, mountains, and oceans alike. The shores of the southern coast stretched endlessly, a meeting place between land and sea, where the dense forest gave way to the lapping waves. Here, the Vanara army gathered, a formidable force of strength, loyalty, and determination, ready to embark on a mission that would test courage, ingenuity, and endurance. Rama stood at the water's edge, observing the vast expanse of the ocean that lay between him and Lanka. The task ahead was daunting, not merely a battle of warriors, but a crossing of nature itself, a bridge across the sea to the heart of the enemy's stronghold. The construction of the bridge, the setu, became the focus of preparation. Stones were gathered, each inscribed with the names of gods, infused with devotion, and imbued with a sense of purpose. The Vanaras worked tirelessly, their efforts coordinated by Hanuman, Sugriva, and Rama's direct guidance. Every placement of rock was deliberate, every calculation precise. The air was filled with the sounds of labor, the steady movement of limbs, the careful placement of stones, and the quiet murmur of strategy and encouragement. The bridge grew steadily, an engineering marvel that combined the skill of the Vanaras with the blessing of the divine. Trees, vines, and natural materials were used alongside stones, creating a structure both resilient and symbolic. It was a bridge not only of stone, but of faith, a testament to the strength of collective purpose. Rama walked along the emerging causeway, observing progress, offering insight, and ensuring that every element aligned with the demands of the journey ahead. As work continued, the air carried omens, subtle and profound. Birds flew in unusual patterns, winds shifted, and the sea occasionally churned with restless energy. These signs were not mere coincidences, they were messages, whispers of what was to come, observed carefully by the sages accompanying the army. Rama, attuned to both the natural and spiritual dimensions of the task, interpreted these omens with quiet reflection. They spoke not only of challenges but of opportunities, guiding decisions in preparation for the confrontation with Ravana. Meanwhile, in Lanka, the demon king convened his council. The golden halls, echoing with the clatter of advisors, generals, and ministers, became a scene of tense deliberation. Ravana, aware of Hanuman's audacious actions, understood that the threat was growing. He listened to strategies, observed the morale of his forces, and considered countermeasures. Omens of his own, signs of impending conflict, were interpreted with care, yet his confidence remained, rooted in his immense strength and mastery over his domain. The contrast between the calm determination of Rama and the growing anxiety in Ravana's court underscored the subtle dynamics of the conflict to come. The construction of the Setu continued day and night. Vanaras worked in teams, their strength coordinated with precision, their movements guided by both instruction and intuition. Stones floated, aided by divine influence, forming a continuous path across the turbulent waves. Water lapped against the emerging causeway, yet it held firm, a miracle born of faith, devotion, and the unwavering determination of the army. Each step in the process was both physical labor and moral affirmation. The bridge represented not only the path to Lanka, but the collective will of those who sought justice. Finally, the time came for the crossing. Rama, Lakshmana, and the Vanara forces assembled at the water's edge, their eyes fixed on the distant shores of Lanka. Every warrior, from the smallest scout to the largest fighter, understood the significance of the moment. The ocean, vast and imposing, was no longer an obstacle but a passage, a channel through which courage, strategy, and dharma would flow. Hanuman led the initial advance, ensuring coordination, morale, and vigilance. The army moved with deliberate precision, each step on the Setu reinforcing their resolve and sense of purpose. As they approached Lanka, the first clashes with the Rakshasas began. Scouts encountered enemy patrols, engaged in swift skirmishes, and tested the strength and readiness of both sides. The initial encounters were chaotic yet controlled, each Vanara warrior employing skill, strength, and strategy honed through training and prior experience. The clash was not merely physical, it carried the weight of destiny, morality, and duty. Every strike, every maneuver was a step toward the larger confrontation, and the warriors understood the importance of discipline as much as courage. Ravana's forces, though vast, were unprepared for the unity, intelligence, and devotion of the Vanara army. Initial skirmishes revealed the power of strategy aligned with moral clarity, and the Rakshasas faced the shock of an adversary guided not only by physical strength, but by unwavering purpose. Rama observed these engagements with calm attention, offering guidance, encouragement, and reassurance. Every clash provided insight, allowing the army to adapt, coordinate, and strengthen in preparation for the full-scale battle that lay ahead. Throughout these early confrontations, the ocean itself seemed to respond. Waves lapped against the Setu with increasing vigor, yet the causeway remained steady, as though reflecting the balance between effort, faith, and purpose. Birds and creatures of the shoreline watched quietly, silent witnesses to the unfolding events. The environment, both natural and spiritual, mirrored the tension of the moment, carrying subtle lessons about patience, vigilance, and perseverance in the face of daunting challenges. The Vanara army, despite fatigue and the vast distance they had traveled, maintained cohesion. Hanuman moved through the ranks, offering guidance and encouragement, his presence a beacon of both intelligence and devotion. Sugriva, restored to his throne and fully aware of the stakes, coordinated movements with discipline and foresight. The soldiers, inspired by the leadership around them, demonstrated not only physical prowess, but also the adaptability and focus that would be critical in the battles ahead. As night fell, the sounds of preparation merged with the rhythmic crashing of the waves. The Setu stretched far into the horizon, a testament to labor, faith, and determination. Scouts reported on enemy positions, the initial skirmishes concluded with lessons learned, and the army settled for a brief rest, knowing that the coming days would demand courage, strategy, and endurance beyond anything experienced before. The stage was set for the confrontation with Ravana's forces. The bridge, now complete, symbolized not merely passage, but resolve, the union of planning, labor, and moral purpose. The first clashes had tested the readiness of the Vanara army, and the lessons of strategy, coordination, and courage had been integrated. The ocean, the bridge, and the forested shores behind them all became part of a landscape imbued with anticipation, a terrain where the forces of dharma would soon face the might of adharma in a decisive conflict. Rama, standing at the forefront of the army, observed the waves reflecting the moonlight. His thoughts were steady, his mind clear. Every detail of the journey had prepared them for this moment. The alliances formed, the reconnaissance by Hanuman, the initial skirmishes, and the construction of the Setu. The ocean no longer appeared as an obstacle, but as a conduit for action and purpose. Every Vanara, every soldier, and every leader understood the magnitude of the task ahead, yet none wavered. And so the army of Rama, guided by strategy, devotion, and unwavering resolve, prepared to step fully into the conflict. The first clashes had been only a prelude, a glimpse of the challenges that awaited. The bridge across the sea was both literal and symbolic, a path from preparation to action, from observation to confrontation, from hope to decisive engagement. The shores of Lanka, distant yet visible, awaited the advance of a force united in purpose, ready to reclaim what had been unjustly taken and to restore Dharma in the face of tyranny. The first light of dawn revealed the golden walls of Lanka, in sharp contrast to the shadowed forests and the restless waters behind Rama's army. The Vanaras, their eyes reflecting both resolve and anticipation, assembled on the sands where the Setu met the island's edge. The air was thick with tension and the scent of salt from the ocean. Every step forward carried the weight of purpose, to reclaim Sita, to uphold Dharma, and to confront the vast power arrayed against them. The battle began not with grand gestures, but with calculated skirmishes and duels. Generals of Ravana, seasoned in war and strategy, faced the first lines of the Vanara army. Arrows and stones flew, the clash of weapons echoing across the plains. Rama, observing carefully, remained composed, his presence a steadying force amidst the chaos. Lakshmana, ever vigilant, led charges, moving with agility and strength, his bow striking with precision, and his resolve unshakable. Each duel was not merely a test of strength, but a measure of courage, strategy, and endurance. Angada, the young and valiant son of Vali, moved with confidence and skill. His strikes were calculated, his leaps across the battlefield both swift and deliberate. He inspired the Vanara warriors through his fearlessness, demonstrating that valor was not solely a product of age or experience, but of purpose and devotion. Sugriva, restored to his throne and commanding his forces with disciplined authority, coordinated movements across the battlefield. The army's structure, both organic and meticulously planned, allowed them to respond with fluidity to the shifting dynamics of conflict. Yet, even as these duels unfolded, the might of Lanka's warriors became apparent. Kumbhakarna, Ravana's brother, emerged from the shadows of the city's fortifications, a giant whose strength and size were legendary. The ground seemed to tremble beneath his footsteps, and the earth itself appeared to resist his advance. The Vanaras, initially awed by his presence, quickly recognized the challenge they faced. Kumbhakarna's sheer power demanded both strategy and courage, for direct confrontation without planning would be perilous. Rama, ever observant, directed the engagement with calm authority. The battle with Kumbhakarna was deliberate, each move considered, each arrow loosed with precision. Lakshmana and the other warriors supported the effort, coordinating attacks and defending against counterstrikes. The duel, though fierce, demonstrated the combination of strategy, skill, and moral clarity that guided the Vanara forces. Kumbhakarna, despite his might, eventually fell, a testament to the power of disciplined courage over raw strength alone. The forested hills echoed with the impact of the battle, the ground scarred, yet the lesson clear. Dharma, guided by intelligence and resolve, can overcome even the most formidable of foes. Amidst these confrontations, Indrajit, Ravana's son, emerged as a figure of cunning and strategy. His mastery of illusions and sorcery challenged the Vanara army in ways that tested both perception and resolve. Warriors found themselves facing apparitions, enemies that seemed countless, and threats that appeared where none existed. Yet Rama, Lakshmana, and their generals moved with clarity, recognizing the signs of deception and responding with precision. The battle became a test not only of physical prowess but of discernment, patience, and unwavering focus. The interplay between valor and strategy defined the early days of the conflict. Every duel, every clash revealed the strengths and weaknesses of both sides. The Vanaras, though courageous and powerful, relied on coordination, observation, and loyalty to maintain their edge. The Rakshasas, formidable in number and skill, depended on intimidation, force, and deception. The battlefield, stretching from the beaches to the outskirts of Lanka, became a living theatre of these opposing forces, each aware that the unfolding struggle carried consequences far beyond the immediate skirmishes. Lakshmana, in particular, demonstrated a combination of agility, precision, and calm authority. His movements across the battlefield were measured yet decisive, his arrows striking with both strength and intent. Warriors rallied around him, inspired by his focus and bravery. In tandem, Angada and Sugriva maintained the cohesion of the Vanara army, ensuring that every advance, retreat, and flank maneuver was coordinated. The unity of the army contrasted sharply with the chaos sown by Indrajit's illusions, highlighting the value of discipline, trust, and leadership in the midst of uncertainty. Meanwhile, Rama, observing from strategic vantage points, prepared for moments that demanded decisive intervention. His presence was both guiding and inspiring, a steady anchor amidst the ebb and flow of battle. Each encounter, whether with generals of Ravana or the emerging threats of Kumbhakarna and Indrajit, reinforced the principle that courage, intelligence, and moral clarity were inseparable in achieving victory. The battlefield, though vast and treacherous, became a space where strategy and virtue converged. The fall of Kumbhakarna, monumental and awe-inspiring, reverberated across Lanka. The Rakshasa army, though still numerous, faced a moment of uncertainty. Their perception of invincibility was challenged, and morale wavered. Yet the war was far from over. Indrajit's cunning ensured that chaos remained, for his illusions tested the Vanara's ability to discern reality, respond with clarity, and maintain cohesion. The psychological aspect of battle became as critical as the physical, reinforcing that every action carried multiple layers of consequence. Rama's calm guidance allowed the Vanara army to navigate these challenges effectively. Hanuman, moving with intelligence and agility, engaged in key maneuvers that disrupted enemy formations and provided vital reconnaissance. The coordination between generals and soldiers, the adaptability to counter illusions, and the unwavering focus on the ultimate objective, rescuing Sita, demonstrated the integration of strategy, loyalty, and courage. Every skirmish, every duel, contributed to the broader unfolding of the war, emphasizing that the strength of an army lies not only in numbers or force, but in discipline, intelligence, and purpose. As the day progressed, the battlefield became a study in contrasts. The might of Lanka's forces, led by generals of extraordinary skill, collided with the strategic coordination, devotion, and courage of Rama's allies. Each clash, whether small or monumental, revealed lessons in timing, observation, and moral clarity. The Vanaras, despite fatigue, maintained focus, Guided by the presence and direction of their leaders, the Rakshasas, formidable as they were, began to sense that raw strength alone would not suffice against an enemy whose resolve was grounded in righteousness. The early battles also revealed the importance of leadership at every level. Sugriva's command ensured unity, Angada's valor inspired the warriors, and Lakshmana's skill provided both offense and defense. Hanuman's intelligence and courage facilitated key maneuvers, while Rama's overarching strategy tied these efforts into a coherent force. The battlefield, though chaotic, reflected a disciplined approach to conflict, where observation, planning, and execution were as critical as individual acts of bravery. By evening, the first phase of the battle concluded with significant consequences. Kumbhakarna had fallen. Indrajit's illusions tested the army's resolve, and the Vanara forces had gained both confidence and insight. Rama, observing the outcomes, understood that each engagement was a lesson, a step toward the larger confrontation that awaited with Ravana himself. The battlefield, scarred yet alive with energy, bore witness to the growing tension, courage, and intelligence that defined the war. And so, the great battle of Lanka continued, its early phase marked by valor, strategy, and the unfolding of both courage and deception. Duels with generals, the might of legendary warriors, and the challenge of illusions set the stage for the monumental confrontations yet to come. Each warrior, guided by discipline and moral clarity, moved closer to the ultimate goal, the rescue of Sita and the restoration of dharma across the lands. The echoes of this beginning phase would resonate across the forests, mountains, and city walls, a reminder that in every conflict, the interplay of courage, wisdom, and righteousness shapes the destiny of all involved. The battlefield of Lanka simmered with tension, its air thick with the clash of weapons, the cries of warriors, and the thunder of feet across scorched earth. Smoke rose in columns where fires had been set by arrows and spells, curling into the sky as if marking the turning points of destiny. Among the Vanara army, every heart pounded with urgency, yet none so intensely as those surrounding Lakshmana. The battle, fierce from the outset, had escalated to a new level with the emergence of Indrajit, the son of Ravana, wielding powers both cunning and lethal. Indrajit, his mind sharpened by strategy and devotion to his father, unleashed the Nagapasha, the serpent weapon, across the battlefield. The weapon, coiling and hissing like a living manifestation of danger, struck with terrifying precision. Its reach seemed inexhaustible, entangling warriors and paralyzing them with the venom of fear and power. Lakshmana, caught in its coils, struggled with every ounce of strength, the poison searing through his body, sapping vitality, and threatening to end his life before the battle could reach its true climax. The forested plains of Lanka seemed to echo his struggle, every rustle of the wind carrying the weight of near despair. Rama's eyes, unwavering yet filled with concern, fixed on his brother. The urgency of the moment transcended the clash of armies and the roar of battle. With calm authority, he directed those around him to respond with both intelligence and speed, understanding that the survival of Lakshmana was critical not only for the mission, but for the morale and coordination of the Vanara forces. The army watched as the serpent coils tightened, the tension between life and death hanging palpably in the air. Hanuman, ever vigilant and devoted, became the lifeline. Without hesitation, he took flight, soaring over the ocean, through winds and clouds, driven by a singular purpose: to retrieve the Sanjivani herb, the only force capable of restoring Lakshmana's fading life. The journey, though fraught with distance and urgency, reflected not merely physical prowess, but the steady, unwavering devotion that defined Hanuman's role in the unfolding saga. Every beat of his wings carried hope, bridging despair and renewal with courage as his guide. Upon reaching the Himalayan heights where the medicinal herbs grew, Hanuman surveyed the terrain with sharp eyes. The mountains, craggy and vast, were dotted with herbs of every description. Among them, the Sanjivani stood out, luminous and vital, a beacon in the wilderness. Yet the mountain's heights and treacherous paths demanded both intelligence and strength. Hanuman, undeterred, applied ingenuity, lifting the entire mountain to ensure the correct herb reached the battlefield in time. His flight back was swift and steady, the ocean and forests below a blur, as if the very world was holding its breath for the outcome. Back on the battlefield, Lakshmana lay still, bound by the serpent weapon, his life flickering like a dim flame. Rama, kneeling beside him, whispered prayers and guidance, his calm presence a counterbalance to the chaos surrounding them. The Vanara army, momentarily frozen in fear, found renewed determination at the sight of Hanuman returning, the mountain in his grasp. The sight was at once extraordinary and comforting, a reminder that devotion and courage can transcend even the most insurmountable obstacles. As Hanuman landed, the herbs were swiftly applied, each leaf infused with life-restoring potency. Lakshmana's eyes fluttered open, the strength returning in waves as his body responded to the miraculous Sanjivani. The battlefield, previously filled with despair at his near-fatal injury, now resonated with renewed hope. The Vanara army, inspired by this act, surged with energy, their strikes becoming more coordinated, precise, and infused with a sense of righteous purpose. Lakshmana, restored and resolute, rose to his feet. His bow, now steadier than ever, became the instrument of vengeance and justice. With focused determination, he confronted Indrajit, the Prince of Lanka, whose previous advantage had been the venomous and magical strikes that now seemed diminished before Lakshmana's revitalized vigor. The duel was intense, each arrow loosed with skill and intent, every movement reflecting both strategy and courage. Indrajit, despite his cunning, found himself unable to match the combination of experience, strength, and moral certainty embodied in Lakshmana. The clash reached its peak as Lakshmana's arrows found their mark, piercing the defenses of Indrajit, neutralizing his spells, and finally bringing him to the ground. The prince, whose mastery of deception and power had caused fear across the battlefield, lay defeated. His fall sent ripples through both armies. Among the Vanaras, hope surged. Among the Rakshasas, shock and fear spread like wildfire. The delicate balance of morale shifted decisively, signaling that the forces of dharma were gaining ground. Ravana, upon receiving the news, experienced a tumult of grief and rage. His son, whose skill and loyalty had been a cornerstone of Lanka's defense, was gone. The golden halls of his palace, once echoing with pride and command, now felt heavy with foreboding. Advisors and generals attempted to steady him, yet even their counsel could not mask the despair that shadowed the king's heart. The contrast between his immense power and his inability to prevent Indrajit's fall revealed the limits of might when confronted by determination, strategy, and devotion aligned with righteousness. The grief and rage within Ravana were not idle emotions. They transformed into decisions that would shape the course of the remaining conflict. His sorrow for his fallen son intertwined with fury at the defiance of Rama and his allies. The palace, usually a place of calculation and control, became a stage for emotion and impulsive determination. Yet even in his anguish, Ravana's strategic mind remained active, plotting countermeasures, considering spells, reinforcements, and traps. The interplay of emotion and intellect created a tension that would define the next phase of the war. Meanwhile, the Vanara army, emboldened by Lakshmana's revival and Indrajit's defeat, advanced with renewed coordination. Hanuman, having executed his mission with extraordinary skill and devotion, continued to guide, support, and inspire the warriors. Every arrow loosed, every charge led, carried not only physical impact, but the weight of moral and strategic clarity. The battlefield had transformed from one of uncertainty to one of opportunity, as lessons learned through struggle, ingenuity, and devotion were applied in real time. Rama, observing his brother and the army, understood the significance of this moment. The near loss and miraculous restoration of Lakshmana, combined with the fall of Indrajit, underscored the dual importance of courage and intelligence, action and strategy, devotion and moral clarity. The forces aligned with Dharma had gained both tactical and psychological advantage, yet Rama knew that the ultimate confrontation with Ravana himself remained ahead, requiring both restraint and decisive action. The day's engagements left the battlefield scarred, but alive with energy. Fires smouldered where spells and weapons had collided, arrows littered the ground, and the cries of both wounded and victorious echoed faintly across the plains. The Vanaras tended to their own, celebrated the miraculous survival of Lakshmana, and prepared for the next phase of the conflict. The defeat of Indrajit, though significant, was merely a step toward the larger objective, the rescue of Sita and the restoration of balance and dharma across the lands. As night descended, a quiet reflection settled over the Vanara camp. The sky, dark yet dotted with stars, mirrored the solemnity of the events. Lakshmana rested, Hanuman reflected on the journey to the Himalayas and back, and Rama contemplated the remaining challenges. The fall of Indrajit and the revival of Lakshmana were more than isolated events. They were turning points that demonstrated the interplay of courage, devotion, intelligence, and moral certainty. These elements combined would guide the army through the remaining trials of the great battle, and so the stage was set for the climactic confrontations to come. The forces of Lanka, though still numerous and formidable, had suffered a blow that would resonate through their ranks. The Vanara army, reinforced both physically and morally, prepared to press forward, guided by leadership, strategy, and unwavering purpose. The narrative of dharma versus adharma, of courage against tyranny, had entered a decisive chapter, one where the consequences of each choice and action would echo across the battlefield and beyond. The battlefield of Lanka, once vibrant with the clash of armies, now held a tense stillness. Fires flickered in the distance, casting long shadows across the scarred plains. The cries of warriors had subsided, leaving only the heavy hum of anticipation and the distant roar of the ocean beyond the Setu. The Vanara army, though weary, formed disciplined ranks, their eyes fixed on the king of Lanka. Rama, calm yet resolute, stepped forward, his bow drawn and his mind centered, ready to face the culmination of the epic struggle. Ravana emerged from the gates of his palace, a figure both magnificent and terrifying. His 10 heads shifted, each face revealing a different emotion: rage, cunning, pride, and despair. His many arms wielded a multitude of weapons, each forged for destruction and honed through years of practice. The ground beneath him seemed to shudder with his presence, as if the earth itself acknowledged the magnitude of the duel about to unfold. The city, once vibrant with activity, fell into an uneasy silence, the inhabitants sensing that the end of an era was imminent. Rama's steps were measured, each movement deliberate. The gods themselves seemed to watch, their blessings woven into the air. The bow in Rama's hands gleamed, its string taut, a bridge between human skill and divine guidance. Every arrow loosed carried more than physical force. It bore the weight of dharma, justice, and unwavering purpose. Across the battlefield, The tension thickened, each breath, taken by warriors and onlookers alike, a part of the silent rhythm that preceded action. The duel began with a flurry of strikes, each warrior testing the other's skill and resolve. Ravana unleashed a storm of arrows and divine weapons, his 10 heads coordinating assaults that seemed to come from all directions at once. The sheer force of his power created gusts of wind that rattled trees and scattered debris. Yet Rama moved with precision, dodging, countering, and responding with a calmness that belied the danger around him. Every step, every shot was calculated, guided not only by strategy, but by divine insight. Ravana's 10 heads allowed him to attack from multiple angles simultaneously. His weapons were varied: arrows, swords, maces, and mystical missiles, each carrying destructive potency. The battlefield seemed to twist and ripple under the intensity of the duel. Yet Rama, guided by the blessings of the gods and the focus of unwavering devotion, parried and countered with arrows of his own. His shots were precise, each finding its mark with an inevitability that reflected both skill and destiny. The contrast between raw might and focused righteousness became increasingly apparent as the battle unfolded. The Vanara army watched with bated breath. Sugriva, Angada, and Hanuman maintained positions at the periphery, ready to support, but aware that the duel was between two forces beyond ordinary measure. The air was thick with tension, the weight of expectation pressing down on every observer. The cries of past battles had faded, replaced by the hum of anticipation, a reminder that this confrontation would decide the fate of Lanka and the culmination of the quest to rescue Sita. Ravana, confident in his strength, launched his most fearsome attacks. Mystical flames erupted from his mouths, while celestial weapons rained upon the battlefield. Each of his 10 heads seemed to coordinate a separate strategy, weaving a complex web of assault. Yet Rama, steady and precise, countered each strike, his arrows infused with divine energy and guided by insight that transcended human perception. The clash became a dance of destruction and restraint where every movement carried consequence and every pause held potential danger. The gods themselves observed, bestowing their blessings upon Rama. Among these was the divine arrow, imbued with powers from the heavens and blessed by Vishnu, the preserver. This arrow was not merely a weapon, but a conduit of cosmic justice, a channel for dharma to assert itself amidst the chaos of conflict. Rama, drawing upon skill, experience, and the blessings bestowed, prepared to release it at the precise moment, understanding that timing, intention, and focus were essential for its efficacy. The duel reached its climax as Rama, guided by insight and resolve, loosed the divine arrow. The projectile moved with breathtaking speed, a streak of light against the darkened battlefield. It bypassed the deflections, illusions, and defenses of Ravana, striking with unerring precision. The arrow pierced the king, severing the connection of his mortal strength and unraveling the defenses of arrogance and pride that had sustained him. The impact reverberated across the battlefield, a shockwave that carried both awe and finality. Ravana fell, his 10 heads lowering in unison, a monument to power, humbled by purpose and righteousness. The silence that followed was profound, stretching across the plains and into the walls of Lanka itself. Fires flickered, smoke drifted lazily into the sky, and the earth seemed to exhale, acknowledging the end of tyranny. The city, once a fortress of pride and power, became still, a witness to the inevitability of dharma asserting itself over unchecked ambition. The Vanara army, though victorious, remained respectful and composed. The moment was solemn, a recognition that the fall of Ravana, though necessary, marked the end of a life intertwined with both grandeur and arrogance. Rama, standing over the fallen king, offered no unnecessary triumph. only a quiet affirmation that justice had been served. The battlefield, scarred and quiet, reflected the magnitude of what had occurred, a resolution born not only of skill and strength, but of moral clarity and unwavering devotion. As the dust settled, the city of Lanka seemed to pause, the echoes of battle fading into silence. The remaining Rakshasas, leaderless and awed, retreated, realizing that their power had been decisively broken. The Vanaras, though vigilant, felt a moment of relief, their discipline maintained even in the midst of victory. The ocean beyond the Setu reflected the calm after the storm, the waves gentle and measured, as if in recognition of the restoration of balance. Rama's attention then turned inward, reflecting on the journey that had led to this confrontation. Every step, from exile, alliance with the Vanaras, Hanuman's daring journeys, the construction of the bridge, and the sequential battles, had culminated in this decisive moment. The fall of Ravana was not merely an act of vengeance, but the restoration of dharma, the realignment of forces in accordance with cosmic justice. Every arrow loosed, every strategy executed, and every act of courage contributed to the shaping of history that would resonate through generations. In the quiet aftermath, the Vanara army tended to the wounded, reflecting both the cost of conflict and the necessity of compassion even in victory. Rama's leadership, calm and precise, ensured that discipline and focus remained, preventing chaos and maintaining the integrity of purpose. The battlefield, though marked by scars of fire, arrow, and strategy, was transformed into a place of reflection, preparation, and recognition of the principles that had guided the struggle. The silence of Lanka was not merely absence of sound, but a testimony to the consequences of hubris and the triumph of resolve guided by righteousness. The palaces, fortifications, and streets that had echoed with pride and defiance now held the weight of reflection. The city, though physically intact in many areas, bore the moral imprint of its king's choices and the inevitability of dharma asserting itself. The lessons of courage, strategy, and devotion lingered in the air, permeating even the distant corners of the island. Rama, bow in hand, walked across the plains, observing the aftermath with calm vigilance. Each fallen warrior, each spent weapon, and each remaining obstacle was considered with measured attention. The focus remained on the ultimate objective, the reunification of the righteous with Sita, and the restoration of order that had been disrupted by Ravana's tyranny. The silence across Lanka allowed for reflection both for the victors and the remnants of the fallen kingdom. And so, with Ravana defeated, the battlefield of Lanka entered a stillness that carried both solemnity and quiet hope. The Vanara army, guided by leadership, discipline, and devotion, prepared for the next steps in the journey, ensuring Sita's safety and restoring the balance of dharma that had been threatened by the darkness of Ravana's reign. The echoes of the final duel would resonate not only across the plains of Lanka, but through the stories, songs, and memories of generations to come, a reminder that courage, strategy, and unwavering moral clarity can reshape destiny itself. The gardens of Lanka, once shadowed by fear and ruled by tyranny, now bore witness to a moment of profound quiet and renewal. Amidst the Ashoka grove, where the whispers of leaves and the gentle sway of branches had once been the only companions to Sita's long vigil, Rama approached with measured steps. The Vanara army had cleared the battlefield, ensuring the path was safe, and the air was filled with a stillness that seemed to honor the reunion about to occur. Sita, steadfast and serene, had endured trials that tested not only her body, but her resolve and devotion. Her eyes, bright and unwavering, lifted as she saw Rama emerge from the shadows of the grove. The space between them seemed suspended in time, the world narrowing to the two figures who had been separated by fate, yet held together by devotion and destiny. Rama's steps slowed, his gaze unwavering, and in that moment, the trials, battles, and arduous journey all found their purpose in the act of reunion. The embrace of Rama and Sita was both tender and symbolic, a convergence of endurance, faith, and love. Words were unnecessary. The silent acknowledgement of suffering, courage, and devotion conveyed more than speech ever could. The Vanaras, observing from a respectful distance, felt a quiet surge of relief and joy. The culmination of their efforts, the victories and sacrifices, were reflected in the simple act of two souls reunited, an affirmation that their struggles had meaning beyond immediate survival. Vibhishana, the brother of Ravana who had chosen righteousness over loyalty to tyranny, assumed his new role with humility and responsibility. His coronation as the king of Lanka was both a practical and symbolic act. The palace, once echoing with the authority of Ravana, now reflected the principles of dharma that had guided its transformation. Advisors and citizens alike observed with a mixture of relief and cautious hope, recognizing that justice and virtue had restored order to a realm long dominated by fear. The preparations for the return journey began quietly, yet with careful attention. The Pushpaka Vimana, the magnificent aerial chariot once the property of Ravana and now returned to its rightful master, stood ready. Its golden surface shimmered in the sunlight, and the air around it seemed charged with a subtle energy, reflecting both divine blessing and the accumulated efforts of all who had participated in the conflict. Rama, Sita, and the Vanara generals approached, their movements deliberate, acknowledging the magnitude of the journey ahead. Not merely a physical return, but the restoration of balance across the kingdoms. As they ascended the Vimana, the landscape of Lanka unfolded below, transformed by both war and renewal. Fires smoldered, palaces bore the marks of battle, and forests whispered the echoes of courage, suffering, and triumph. The Vanara army followed, their wings and movements coordinated as they prepared to escort the returning royals. Every individual, whether flying or marching, was aware that the journey back to Ayodhya was a bridge not only across land, but across the trials that had tested them all. The flight itself was quiet, yet profound. The ocean stretched beneath them, waves reflecting the sky in rippling patterns of silver and gold. Mountains, forests, and distant villages appeared as silent witnesses to the procession, marking a path that had been transformed by extraordinary events. Each passing moment carried both reflection and anticipation. Reflection of the trials endured, anticipation of the homecoming that would restore both personal and societal equilibrium. Upon reaching the outskirts of Ayodhya, the air was thick with expectation. Bharata, who had waited faithfully, maintaining the kingdom as regent in Rama's absence, stood at the edge of the city. The joy in his eyes was palpable, a mixture of relief, love, and reverence. The city itself, adorned and prepared for celebration, seemed to shimmer with collective anticipation. Every citizen, aware of the journey's trials and the restoration of their true king, awaited the arrival with hearts full of hope and wonder. Rama and Sita descended from the Pushpaka Vimana amidst cheers, songs, and offerings. The streets of Ayodhya, lined with citizens and allies, resonated with a vibrancy that reflected not only relief but also reverence for the values restored through the journey. Lakshmana, Bharata, and the Vanara generals walked beside them, their presence a testament to loyalty, courage, and the unity that had carried them through trials both mortal and divine. Every step taken along the streets was a silent acknowledgement of the hardships endured and the triumphs achieved. The reunion between Rama and Bharata was quiet, yet deeply emotional. The two brothers, separated by circumstance but bound by shared purpose and love, acknowledged the sacrifices and responsibilities borne during Rama's absence. Bharata's devotion, maintaining the throne without claim to it, and Rama's unwavering commitment to dharma created a harmony that resonated across the city. Their gestures, though restrained, conveyed more than words. A bond of trust, duty, and familial love that had withstood the trials of time and turmoil. The coronation of Rama as the king of Ayodhya followed, a ceremony imbued with both splendor and solemnity. Priests chanted sacred hymns, the air filled with the fragrance of incense, and citizens observed with reverence. The crowning was not merely a political act, but a ritual affirmation of dharma restored, of leadership guided by virtue and courage, and of a kingdom reunited under principles that transcended mere rule. Rama's acceptance of the crown was humble, reflecting both gratitude and the weight of responsibility. Sita by his side embodied resilience, virtue, and grace. Her presence reinforced the values for which the journey had been undertaken, and her composure in the face of past trials inspired both admiration and quiet reflection. Together, Rama and Sita represented the synthesis of courage, devotion, and moral clarity, a model not only for leadership, but for the enduring principles of dharma that would guide Ayodhya into an era of peace and prosperity. The celebrations extended across the city, yet beneath the joy lay a subtle, reflective quiet. Citizens, warriors, and advisors alike recognized that the events leading to this homecoming had been extraordinary. The lessons of endurance, courage, loyalty, and moral clarity were evident in every story retold, every song sung, and every gesture of honor paid to the returning royals. The city itself seemed transformed, imbued with a renewed sense of purpose and a collective acknowledgement of the journey's significance. As night fell over Ayodhya, lanterns cast a gentle glow across the streets. The celebration softened into quiet reflection, and the city, restored to peace, embraced a sense of equilibrium long absent. Rama, Sita, and their companions settled into the palace, not in haste, but with deliberate awareness of the journey's meaning. The experiences of exile, battle, and reunion were absorbed not only as history, but as guidance for the future, a reminder that virtue, courage, and devotion shape the destiny of both individuals and the kingdoms they serve. And so the return to Ayodhya marked more than a physical homecoming. It was the restoration of dharma, the affirmation of purpose, and the renewal of hope across a kingdom that had endured trials, celebrated victories, and witnessed the resilience of devotion and courage. The stage was set for peace, prosperity, and the continuation of a legacy that would resonate across generations. Ayodhya, once brimming with joy at the return of its king and queen, gradually settled into rhythms of everyday life. The streets hummed with commerce. Children played along riverbanks and temples echoed with chants of devotion. Yet beneath the surface of celebration, subtle murmurs began to circulate, whispers of uncertainty that, though quiet, carried the weight of doubt. Some wondered about Sita's time in captivity, questioning the purity and sanctity of the queen they had welcomed home with such reverence. Rama, aware of the undercurrents of suspicion among his people, faced a dilemma that pierced deeper than any arrow ever could. The king, bound by the principles of dharma and the responsibilities of rulership, felt the weight of expectations pressing on him from all directions. The whispers, though unjust, were voices of his subjects, voices he could not ignore without betraying his duty as a king. The balance between personal love and public responsibility became an agonizing tension in his heart, a quiet torment that no one could fully witness or understand. The decision that followed was among the most painful in Rama's life. With measured sorrow and a heart heavy with both love and obligation, he resolved to send Sita away. The palace, which had once been alive with music and laughter, grew somber. The walls seemed to echo with memories of their reunion, now shadowed by the inevitability of duty. Sita, understanding the burden Rama carried as king, accepted the decree with grace, though the sorrow in her eyes spoke of the pain that words could not convey. Accompanied by trusted attendants, Sita departed Ayodhya, walking the path that led to the hermitage of sage Valmiki. The journey was quiet, marked by both dignity and silent anguish. The forests through which she passed seemed to embrace her sorrow, their rustling leaves offering a gentle companionship. Birds paused their songs, as if acknowledging the gravity of the queen's exile, and the riverbanks reflected her resolve and the quiet dignity that had defined her character throughout her trials. Valmiki's hermitage welcomed Sita with compassion and reverence. The sage, whose wisdom transcended ordinary understanding, provided her a sanctuary, a place where sorrow could transform into resilience. The hermitage, nestled among dense forests and flowing streams, became a cradle of new beginnings. Here, the queen, once confined by circumstance and rumor, found space to nurture life, restore her spirit, and prepare for the future that destiny had quietly reserved for her. It was within the peaceful confines of this hermitage that Sita gave birth to her twin sons, Lava and Kusha. Their arrival, quiet yet profound, symbolized hope and continuity in the midst of uncertainty. Each child, marked by the lineage of virtue and courage, embodied the promise of a future shaped by dharma. Sita's nurturing presence, calm and unwavering, ensured that the twins grew surrounded by both wisdom and love, absorbing the teachings of Valmiki and the rhythms of the forest. Lava and Kusha, though young, exhibited signs of extraordinary potential. Their movements carried confidence, their curiosity was tempered with intelligence, and their bond with Sita reflected both innocence and understanding. The hermitage, previously a place of solace, now thrummed with life and purpose, the twins' laughter and questions blending with the murmurs of nature. Even amidst the shadows of exile, the seeds of destiny were growing, quiet yet unstoppable. Meanwhile, Ayodhya continued its own path, unaware of the exact whereabouts of the queen, but still feeling the subtle absence that her exile had created. Rama, bound by duty, maintained his rule with unwavering commitment, performing ceremonies, resolving disputes, and ensuring the prosperity of his people. Yet in the quiet moments of night, when the palace halls were still and the city slept, the king's heart revisited the memory of Sita, her grace, and the trials that had shaped both their lives. Each reflection was a mixture of sorrow, longing, and the persistent tension between personal love and public duty. The hermitage became a center not only of maternal care, but of education and discipline. Valmiki, recognizing the extraordinary potential in Lava and Kusha, began teaching them both the art of the bow and arrow and the stories of the past, including the events that had led to their mother's exile. The boys absorbed the lessons with a rare combination of curiosity and reflection, their young minds already attuned to the principles of dharma, courage, and resilience. Through these teachings, they began to understand the complexities of duty, the necessity of virtue, and the quiet power of moral integrity. Sita, while nurturing her sons, also maintained her own spiritual practices. Her days were filled with meditation, teaching, and tending to the hermitage, each act reinforcing the inner strength that had carried her through captivity, separation, and the judgment of others. Her quiet dignity remained unbroken, an example to Lava and Kusha, to the forest, and to all who would come to know her story. Even in the shadow of doubt, Sita's life reflected unwavering adherence to truth, resilience, and devotion. The exile, though imposed, created a space for reflection on the nature of justice, societal expectation, and moral responsibility. Lava and Kusha grew not merely as children of royal blood, but as embodiments of the principles that had guided their parents through unimaginable trials. Every story Valmiki shared, every lesson in archery or conduct, became a thread in the tapestry of understanding that would shape their future actions. The forest echoed with the quiet certainty that life, even when shadowed by doubt, could nurture virtue and purpose. Back in Ayodhya, the citizens continued their lives under Rama's benevolent guidance, yet the absence of Sita remained a silent undercurrent. The city prospered, festivals were celebrated, and the rhythms of daily life returned, but the whispers of doubt had left their mark. Rama, ever attentive to both public duty and private reflection, maintained the balance with steadfast commitment, his actions guided by principle, even when personal sorrow weighed heavily on his heart. The birth of Lava and Kusha, though far from the city, symbolized a continuity that transcended the immediate shadow of doubt. The twins' presence, nurtured by Sita and Valmiki, represented hope and the quiet unfolding of destiny. Each day in the hermitage reinforced lessons in courage, morality, and resilience, laying the foundation for their future roles in the unfolding history of Ayodhya and the lineage of Rama. Thus, the period of exile and doubt was not merely a chapter of sorrow, but one of profound growth, understanding, and preparation. Sita's steadfastness, the nurturing of Lava and Kusha, and the teachings of Valmiki ensured that the forces of virtue and dharma continued to flourish even when separated from the centers of power. The forest, the hermitage, and the quiet routines of daily life became a stage where resilience, moral clarity, and destiny converged, shaping the next generation and preparing for the eventual restoration of balance and recognition. And so, in the quiet embrace of the forest and the protection of the hermitage, the shadow of doubt served not to diminish life, but to refine it. Sita, Lava, and Kusha, guided by virtue, devotion, and wisdom, continued to thrive, their story a living testament to the enduring power of integrity, resilience, and moral fortitude. The lessons learned in this period would resonate far beyond the hermitage, shaping destinies and echoing through the generations that would follow. The forests surrounding Valmiki's hermitage were alive with the quiet rhythm of life, yet a sense of destiny lingered, palpable as the gentle wind through the trees. Lava and Kusha, now young men of remarkable skill and wisdom, practiced archery with precision and focus, their minds sharp, their hearts steady. The stories Valmiki had shared, recounting the adventures, trials, and virtues of their father Rama, had instilled in them both knowledge and reverence. Each arrow loosed carried not only physical force, but the weight of lessons and legacy. It was during one of these moments, under the soft light of dawn, that Rama himself arrived, unseen at first by the twins. The sight of the legendary king, so familiar yet distant through stories, struck a chord deep within Lava and Kusha. Their initial astonishment gave way to reverence, and then to recognition as the threads of their lineage and destiny converged in a moment of silent awe. The forest seemed to hold its breath, as if nature itself paused to honor the reunion of father and sons. Rama approached, his steps measured and calm, eyes reflecting a mixture of joy, relief, and the quiet sadness that had accompanied his reign. Lava and Kusha, though initially cautious, felt the innate warmth of his presence. Words were not immediately necessary. The understanding between them was profound, a recognition of shared blood, shared values, and the inevitability of destiny fulfilled. Rama knelt briefly, acknowledging the growth and potential of the sons he had not raised, but whose virtues mirrored his own. The meeting was tender, a merging of past and future, of lessons learned and legacy inherited. Lava and Kusha shared stories of their upbringing under Valmiki, of the training and teachings that had shaped them, and of the principles of dharma that guided their daily lives. Rama listened with quiet pride, aware that despite the trials of separation, the threads of virtue, courage, and wisdom had endured, and the reunion was not merely familial, it was symbolic of the restoration of continuity, the unbroken line of dharma passing from father to sons. Yet even in this joy, the weight of sorrow remained. Sita, whose life had been defined by endurance, grace, and unwavering devotion, had continued to bear the burdens of doubt and separation. The moment came when she approached Rama, her presence serene and resolute. Her eyes reflected both love and the quiet acceptance of the inevitable. Without words, she conveyed the trials endured and the virtues upheld, the balance of life, duty, and devotion compressed into the calm dignity of her being. In the presence of her family, Sita returned to the earth from which she had been born. The moment was both heartbreaking and transcendent, a reminder that even the greatest trials must ultimately yield to the rhythms of the universe. The ground itself seemed to respond, softening beneath her feet, as if the earth acknowledged her purity, devotion, and the suffering she had endured. Rama's grief was profound, silent, yet held with the restraint befitting both a king and a man of virtue. The sorrow was personal, yet it mirrored the cosmic sense of balance being restored. With Sita's departure, the final chapter of human trials in the Ramayana unfolded. Rama, now aware that the responsibilities of kingship and family had reached a culmination, prepared to return to the form from which he had descended. The Sarayu River, flowing gently, yet with an undercurrent of sacred significance, awaited him. Its waters shimmered in the sunlight, reflecting not merely the landscape, but the spiritual significance of this final passage. Citizens of Ayodhya and allies alike observed with reverence, understanding that the king's departure was not an ending, but a return to the divine essence that had guided him throughout his life. Rama's steps toward the river were calm and measured, each movement reflective of centuries of dharma, courage, and moral clarity. The Vanara generals, loyal brothers, and citizens watched silently, their hearts heavy with both sorrow and reverence. Every footfall was a reminder of the journey's trials, victories, and the enduring lessons embedded within the saga of his life. The river, as if sensing the magnitude of the moment, rippled gently, carrying the reflection of the sky, the forests, and the people who had borne witness to the unfolding of this epic. As Rama entered the waters of the Sarayu, a transformation began that transcended the mortal realm. His body, once subject to human fragility, dissolved seamlessly into divine light. The river itself seemed to embrace him, reflecting his essence in its calm currents. The citizens, warriors, and companions observed in quiet awe, recognizing that the king they had served and revered was returning to the cosmic form of Vishnu, the preserver. This return was not a disappearance, but a continuation, a merging with the eternal, where virtue, courage, and devotion remained ever present. Lava and Kusha, standing at the riverbank, witnessed this final transformation with solemn understanding. The lessons imparted by their mother, Valmiki, and the experiences they had absorbed were now fully contextualized by the presence and departure of their father. They understood that life while bounded by mortal limitations, could also carry the essence of the eternal when guided by dharma. The river's gentle flow mirrored the continuity of time, the cycle of duty and devotion, and the promise that stories, once lived and shared, transcend the confines of individual existence. Ayodhya, now quiet, yet suffused with reverence, reflected on the legacy of its king. The Ramayana, while chronicling trials, battles, exile, and reunion, also embodied the principles that would endure far beyond mortal lifespans: courage, moral clarity, devotion, and the pursuit of justice. The citizens, in their observance of Rama's final departure, felt both loss and inspiration, a combination that would guide their own lives and the generations to follow. Temples, gardens, and streets alike carried the memory of his reign, each a reminder that dharma, when embodied fully, shapes both individual and collective destiny. The forests around the hermitage, the riverbanks of the Sarayu, and the city of Ayodhya became silent witnesses to the unfolding of cosmic justice and human virtue intertwined. The story, though concluding in physical presence, continued through memory, teaching, and inspiration. Lava and Kusha, as heirs of both blood and virtue, carried forward the lessons learned, ready to shape the future of Ayodhya and ensure that the principles embodied by their father and mother remained living truths. In the quiet aftermath, the lessons of the Ramayana emerged with clarity. Life, while marked by trials and shadows of doubt, unfolds according to principles that transcend immediate perception. Courage, devotion, sacrifice, and moral integrity are the threads that weave continuity through time. The story of Rama, Sita, and their companions becomes more than legend. It is a meditation on the nature of duty, love, and the balance between human experience and cosmic order. The sunset over Ayodhya reflected this eternal balance, painting the city in shades of gold and crimson. The river glimmered with light, the forests whispered in gentle agreement, and the city exhaled a collective recognition of the legacy left behind. The Ramayana, complete yet everlasting, stood as a reminder that every action, every decision guided by virtue, resonates far beyond the confines of a single lifetime. And so, with Rama's return to the divine and the continuation of Lava and Kusha's journey, the epic reached its final chapter, not as an ending, but as a reflection on the eternal interplay of life, virtue, and destiny. The story persists, whispered in the wind, sung in temples, and remembered in heart, an enduring testament to courage, devotion, and the timeless pursuit of dharma.